At Crossroads, we're glad you're here with us today. Today, episode 42, Friday, January 22nd, we're going to bring our screen share back up here. We've been playing around, as you can see, with the videos, and as usual, we're trying to get our act together. We're going to bring this up right over here. So it's a great day today. We are glad to have you with us. We're going to touch on the COVID news, as we always do. After that, our own Adrienne Harris is going to tell us about the FDA STeP program, which, if you've heard about the breakthrough device pathway, similar but not the same. We're going to break it down and look at the similarities and differences. And then after that, Steve Rapundalo from MichBio. They've got a great slate of things happening this late winter and spring, and we want to tell you all about it. After that, Q&A. And we're going to have a good time with all of that. So again, episode 42 today, we do have to tip our hat, of course, to Douglas Adams, because what's special about 42? Well, it's the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And if we didn't say that this show, we were going to miss out on the chance, never to be repeated again. If you're a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan, there you go. That was for you. Today, we're talking COVID metrics from covidtracking.com. Our audience is often asked, where can we go for data? Not opinion, not all the news. We don't trust the news sources. Where do we go for data? One of the rock solid places that we've gotten that throughout this has been covidtracking.com, which was put up by The Atlantic, journalists from The Atlantic. And they've just done a consistently good job of tracking the actual numbers. And as we've tracked 924,000 hospital beds in the US, we are now finally starting to see that peak over the top at just north of 120,000 filled due to COVID. And of course, as we've talked, the first peak was primarily the Northeast, the second peak primarily the South and West, and then this third peak nationwide, which has obviously been quite overwhelming. Region by region, we are finally this week, first week, seeing peaks in all of the regions. We are seeing January peaks in all of the regions with numbers starting to come back down. So some good news this week. This chart doesn't look much different than when we showed you last week. Still relatively high numbers in the South, but starting to shrink. Michigan has just dropped from that over 200 per million to the under 200 per million. So you're seeing that travel downwards. This next one is a really nice one to look at, because last week we had to note that cases were only falling in 10 states and staying the same in 32, but that was an improvement from the week before. This week, cases are rising in only 2 states, staying the same in 7, and falling in 47 states. So that's exciting to see happening there. As always, the Michigan data, we see that the currently hospitalized, the number we like to track most, and that provides probably the best look at what's happening, is dropping very, very nicely. Not out of the woods, but dropping very nicely. And that's just very exciting. Some of the best news we've been able to report on in a long time. I want to show you a graph that we have not showed before, and this is a really cool one. Early on, we were able to show you data from this gentleman, Ben Gregory, who was doing a wonderful job of charting data from this. This is hospitalizations by state. Gray is no data. Dark purple means low hospitalizations per 10,000 people. And as you get up to the pinks and oranges and yellows, that's a pretty high number. And you can watch as this is traveling across the country. Probably the best graphic we've had yet of how this thing has progressed around the country. Here it starts up in April. We're starting to see the Northeast peak. Then we wait till the summer. We're going to see the South and some of the West peak up. Here it comes. There it is in the South and West. Everything was calm up north. And now here comes the fall, where things just started to light up all over the place. And we see the North peaking. We see the Midwest peaking, back to the South and back out to the West again. Great graphic. Want to point you to bengregorydata.com. This guy has just found really creative ways to chart the actual data, and we've really enjoyed seeing it. Glad he has now stood that up not just on Reddit, but he's stood it up as a separate website where he's doing a great job of tracking this. From what we've seen, it really, really agrees with what we've seen over the course of this from a data perspective. So really exciting there. Vaccine distribution. We thought it'd be cool to track what's happening with vaccines. And this is interesting. I want to talk to our guest, Stephen Rapundalo, later in the show about his thoughts on this, because we're noticing that this can get really, really political. I'm going to give you some news on it first, and then later in the show, we'll talk about this a little bit. But COVID-19 vaccinations surpassed 500,000 in Michigan. That's great. That is about half of the vaccines distributed. This from MLive. Then here's one, and this is going to sound negative, but I want you to take this with a grain of salt. Limited COVID-19 vaccine supply postpones another Washtenaw County vaccination clinic. That's great for the news cycle. And Washtenaw County is saying that they have not been able to get vaccines from the state. And if I just shared those two with you, I think it would sound like, oh, the vaccines are available and the state's just not doing a good enough job getting them out. But I want to take you to the New York Times too, because we're wrestling with what this really means. And it seems like a blame game where people are just playing all around with it. This is what the US looks like in terms of vaccine distribution. See how the vaccine rollout is going in your state. From the New York Times, this is another good data source that we've found. And if you just looked at this graph, you would say that North Dakota, South Dakota, New Mexico, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Connecticut were doing the best job of anybody. But what we're finding from the data is that this number right here, US total, about half of the doses distributed have been given. If we followed that down to every state, you would find that in most states, that's kind of how the numbers have been playing out. About half of what they've got, they've been able to distribute. And that's just about where it stands for every single state. There is a delay between having them in hand and getting them taken out. So some states, that represents a higher percentage of the population than others. But I do think it's fascinating. We hear all this stuff going around, and yet when it really comes down to how fast they're distributing it, it sure looks like what the data is showing is that you get it and you get about half of it out before you get more. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. So time will tell how that plays out, but that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment in terms of vaccine distribution. There is news all over the place, though, that it's hard to get it if you want it. It's still less than the demand. The supply is still less than the demand. Okay, really briefly, we just want to tell you really quick again about the MedTech Crossroads pitch party that's happening starting in February. Really quickly, here's the plan. We're going to bring in for 10 minutes at the end of each show a MedTech startup. At the end of the month, we're going to let our panel of judges assign one to win a $1,000 prize. And we're calling it a pitch party, not a pitch competition, because this is really about listening to our judges to say, hey, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? We can't pick winners and losers. We just want to have a fun time listening to some cool startups, hearing what they have to say, and thinking about what some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses are. We're actually into March now for applicants. We've got February full, so we are still looking for folks, but they're going to be into March at this point. And it was so fun last week. We had Walt Young on the show, and you know Walt Young does not pull punches. And at the end, he said, I don't like pitch competitions. I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't like pitch competitions. And we said, Walt, that's great. We want to hear that because we're not here to sell something doesn't have to be that way. And Walt said something really profound. He said, too often those who win pitch competitions are winning for the wrong reasons, and too often those who lose are losing for the wrong reasons. In other words, you can get really good at pitching, but it doesn't mean you're good at running a startup that's going to be successful. So we're going to take a lot of lessons from what Walt taught us, and we're going to try to bring it into that pitch party so that we can think about, this isn't just about winning a pitch competition. This is about talking about the issues that make startups successful and that make them not so successful. So we'll try to have some fun with that. And with that, I want to close down the share that we have going on here. There we are. And next up, I want to welcome Adrienne Harris from the Into Being team live with us. Hey, Adrienne, how's it going today?
Friday.
It's Friday. It's good.
I'm excited. Uh, Always
It's a
happy for Friday.
it's a good day to be a Friday. Yeah,
Hmm.
we're very thankful. And we're thankful to have you here today. We are going to hear from you today about the STeP program that FDA has rolled out. This is exciting. I think many have heard, even you speak about the breakthrough device pathway, which I know we've had a lot of success getting for clients in certain situations. But there's some catches to that. And now FDA is making this more accessible, or something similar, more accessible. I'd love for you to take us away and tell us more about this process.
Sure, I will do my best. So originally, this guidance and program was supposed to be issued in September of last year. With COVID, like everything, it got delayed. The FDA had it on their top priority list to release in 2021, and I think they met that. It came out January 6th. The STeP is meant to complement the breakthrough program, and the big diversion, well, I think the big diversion is somewhere different, but the big diversion, as far as like their forward and their discussion around it, is it's for um, treating diseases with less seriousness than would be eligible for breakthrough.
Mm,
So, where the breakthrough says a more effective treatment or diagnosis of a life threatening or life debilitating disease, maybe you have a device that's treating or diagnosing something that's not life threatening or not debilitating, but it's still super innovative and deserves this program. So STeP stands for the Safer Technologies Program, which makes it kind of hard. In preparing all this, I keep wanting to say the STeP program, but then it's program. So the STeP is the idea is to help patients have more timely access to medical devices and device-led combination products, which I'm going to come back to that in a minute, by expediting their development, their assessment, and their review through the FDA. And it's
mm,
very similar to the breakthrough. It's kind of like I described the breakthrough as a fast pass at Cedar Point. It gets you to the front of the line. It gives you priority reviews. It gets you their attention undivided so that it can get out there. Um, so let's talk about what the requirements and eligibility are.
mm,
So first, you cannot be eligible for breakthrough. FDA is going to be the one that decides that, but just like all submissions, you have to put the argument in as to why you're not eligible for breakthrough. Um, the device must be subject to a pre-market review. So if you're a class 1 or GM 510K exempt, no go. PMA, 510K, de novo, it has to at least fall into one of those. As part of the submission, you have to be able to demonstrate, and this is the same as breakthrough, demonstrate a reasonable expectation that it's going to do what you're saying it's going to do. These are bench studies, they're literature reviews, they're using current data. It's not a full clinical study, you're not at the end of the process, but you still need to have shown that it's not just a napkin sketch at this point. One of the interesting things about STeP is it's all about the benefit risk profile and showing that your new technology is going to reduce the risk or add considerable benefit. I think they use the word significant benefit to other devices that are currently existing and legally marketed in the United States. So if you're super beneficial, more beneficial or safer than a product that's not in the United States, again, that now you're no longer eligible.
mm.
Um, these are the straightforward parts. Now I'm going to get to the second criteria, and this is a little more touchy-feely, and the FDA always gives examples in their guidance, and I think it's going to take a little bit more like noodling, especially on a certain type of product to make the arguments, but I'm going to read them off to you the way they wrote them, and then we can talk about examples or how that might be applied. So with your new technology, your device, you need, when compared to another device, not just yours as standalone, you need to be able to show a reduction in the occurrence of a known serious adverse event, a reduction or a reduction in the occurrence of a known device failure mode, a reduction in the occurrence of a known use-related hazard or use error, or an improvement in the safety of another device or intervention.
Mm.
It's a lot of talking it through, documenting it, showing why, and I've tried to come up with some super easy examples for this because I did not yet, because the ones that they provided in the guidance are, in my opinion, a little bit wildly out there. Like the example for a reduction in the occurrence of a known serious adverse event. The FDA suggests as an example, modification to the fundamental principle of operation of an existing device that is reasonably expected to significantly reduce or eliminate serious infections. Okay, we've seen that with catheters, we've seen that with catheter cleaning caps, things like that. That could be STeP related. A new implantable device that is reasonably expected to significantly reduce or eliminate debilitating symptoms that are known to manifest after implantation of a device. A new in vitro diagnostic that's reasonably expected to significantly reduce or eliminate the occurrence of serious adverse events associated with a newly approved drug that is known to be interfering with the performance of existing in vitro diagnostic devices. So I feel like their examples are dense, not super straightforward. So as we try and apply this to the startups that we work with or other new technologies, there's going to be some wiggle room for. To call it creative writing is probably doing it a disservice, but to really, figure out how you're going to position your own device.
Adrienne, a question there. It's really interesting because on the one hand, they're making this a lower barrier to entry. It seems like than a breakthrough device pathway, but then, as I heard you say, focus in on benefit risk. Which those who've listened to the show for a long time, we've talked about benefit risk a number of times. So it's good to see FDA sort of doubling down on that framework and saying, yeah, we really want you to think about it this way. But yeah, it seems like what you're saying is like a lot of times we're telling startups, hold on your data collection because we don't yet know what FDA wants. We got to go talk to them. We got to find out what they want for your device type. And I think what I'm hearing you say is to get through the door on this, you've got to come in hand with a whole bunch of data that you're reducing some risk. It sounds like. Did I have that correct?
Well, like they say, it's a reasonable expectation that your device is going to do what you say it does, and that if it does that, you are going to show a significant increase in the safety and or reduction of the risk compared to another device or devices that are on the market. That can't be a literature review. Like, so if we use that infection example, we know that there are catheter related bloodstream infections. There's plenty of data on the rate that they happen, what types of catheters they're involved in. And let's say you have a device that is supposed to reduce that through making the user adhere to cleaning protocols. That's a huge one. Or like I mentioned, the little fancy alcohol caps that came out a few years back. And you can show like, oh, as long as you keep this cap clean, we're going to reduce the chance of transmitting an infection. So we're going to be safer overall for catheters. Now that one fits into a number of them, but it's actually almost like an improvement in the safety of another device, an intervention. And you can always meet more than one of these criteria. It's actually, the more you can meet and the more you can justify it, the better, but you only need to meet one specifically. Connectors, we know that there are, there's a lot of connector ISO standards now about, so you can't hook an IV line into an oxygen line or a nitrogen line into an oxygen line. That kind of innovation, I think, is, reducing the serious events, reducing user error. So kind of just thinking through what devices currently could have met this program and how do we apply that going forward.
That's very cool. Okay, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, but you were midstream
okay.
for the next steps here.
So just like the breakthrough, there's 2 phases. You request to be entered into the program, and you do that through a pre-sub. So you document out all your reasons. The guidance in the back actually has a nice appendix. I'm going to put a link to where you can download the guidance from in the chat box. You submit that. It's a little bit different than a traditional pre-sub. There's not a refuse to accept period. They're going to review it. They intend to get back with you for any additional information requests within 30 days and give you an approval or a denial into the program within 60 days. After that, now you're just in the program. It doesn't change any of the requirements for your safety testing, your efficacy testing, for anything they have to do for a PMA, 510K, a de novo. It does not change any of that, but it gives you that access to the FDA, that cut in line tag. However, they did put in there that if the FDA resources are under strain or become limited, breakthroughs get front of the line, steps fall second. So
And then everybody else after that who's done a
Yep.
traditional or whatever else.
Mhm.
Okay.
Some other interest. I really like the way this one was written, and I encourage everyone to try and read it because I feel like they stepped away from a lot of regulatory verbiage. I think they're really trying to address the med device industry as a whole, knowing that not everyone's a regulatory expert. There's still some stuff in there that you have to parse, but they've put a lot of thought into this guidance. And another one was, so you've created this new safety innovation, and it's definitely going to reduce the risk in some way, but they said, if it introduces a potential new serious adverse event or use related hazard, then no, you cannot be part of the STeP. Like, you can't turn off one hazard and turn on another and think that that's going to get you there.
That's interesting because that really agrees with the way FDA has approached, for example, substantial equivalence. And while they've tried to be flexible, they've always said, look, if the changes, the technical changes introduce new questions of safety or effectiveness, then you might not be eligible for that pathway. So I don't know, to me that sounds like that is actually consistent with their approach. Is that your read?
It is. I enjoyed seeing that they thought about it enough to put it in there. Don't come to us with this great innovation if you just caused 100 other problems.
Now that's just such a lesson for anyone developing devices, is watch out for what all the cool changes you just made. They also have a dark side to them sometimes. And you got to know what that is. You got to shine the light back there before you walk in and say, this is great.
Yep. So again, like Breakthrough, you're like, there's a lot of parallels with Breakthrough, and then there's differences. So this, they go into, significant safety improvements over the current standard of care, which is Breakthrough, more effective diagnosis or treatment of a disease. But they put in that you still have to compare it to an actual device that's on the market, and Breakthrough doesn't have that aspect as far as I interpret it. You can take a lone device to Breakthrough with just a more effective treatment or diagnosis. It doesn't matter if there's anything else out there or not out there. That's what they're looking for. Actually, Breakthrough is nothing else like it exists. And this is saying other things like it exist and you need to make it better.
Okay, so and I think we did hear that, but we did need to rehear that, which is that for STeP, there has to be a device out there that you're able to say we're making this better. Whereas Breakthrough, interesting. That's a great point to just focus on for a second there.
Okay, so now I've got the fine print that's at the bottom of the screen. I've tried to sum this up into bullet points. We talked about that you have to be a pre-market review device. We talked about how Breakthrough still gets priority over STeP, but STeP gets priority over everything else. The 30 and 60-day time frame. One of the interesting things, and this is still in the guidance, and it's on their website too, the FDA anticipates that it's going to take them approximately 60 days to actually get this program operational, and they do not intend to accept submissions for the next 60 days. I don't know how they're going to announce when they are accepting submissions. They didn't put that in there. So 60 days from January 6th, we should have an operational STeP program. In that time frame, if you think your device meets it or your technology meets it, then you can start preparing the submission, but it can't go in yet.
Okay, so we're not open for STeP submissions yet, but give it another 60 days and we may well be.
Or less. We'll see.
Or less.
They may take up to 60 days. This was one of my favorites. So the device-led combo products are eligible for STeP. However, so it's got to be a device-led combo, but the innovation that's making it safer has to be on the device side.
Interesting. Our listeners will remember that if you're a combination product, you might be going through CDRH, Center for Devices and Radiological Health, CBER, Biological Evaluation Research, or CDER, Drug Evaluation Research. And you're saying that you might be eligible, combination product, but CDRH has to be leading it.
Yes.
And that's where the innovation has to be.
Oh, no, not just CDRH must be leading it. The innovation has to be on the device side.
The device side. Wow, interesting.
So I tried to come up with a good example of that. And to me, it's like a fancy, an EpiPen. Maybe they improve now the drug, the epinephrine actually lasts longer and it's in the same EpiPen. That's not going to be eligible for STeP. It has to be an improvement in the device portion of the device drug combo.
Very cool. Very cool. That's a great detail.
Another really interesting tidbit in here that diverges from the Breakthrough. So the Breakthrough very clearly says you cannot have done a pre-market submission yet, and you cannot be on the market. Once you're on the market, once you do a pre-market submission, do not pass go, you don't get breakthrough. This one actually says you can submit after submitting a pre-market review submission and in parallel. So at the same time, and the breakthrough also very clearly says you cannot do any of this in parallel. Though the guidance does point out that you're really not going to get the benefits of the program if you do that. So I've tried to kind of parse the politics behind that being allowed that way. The one thing I can think about is, as we talked about with the breakthrough devices, there was that executive order that said any device, it was not signed yet, and I haven't checked with the new administration, that if you got breakthrough designation, you already got automatically got a Medicare billing code. And so people like jumped at that because we all know that that's a super barrier to entry for innovation. And I'm wondering if they're anticipating that happening. So yeah, we made it all the way to our pre-market review submission, but we still want this step because it's going to get us something in the insurance, billing, CPT, Medicare, Medicaid program.
I was going to say it does seem to align that this is a step that, and maybe I'm wrong here, but it does seem like it helps to align interests in the kinds of things that insurers and Medicare and Medicaid have been saying they want to pay for. So it seems like this is an alignment step, if anything.
That's what I'm anticipating why they are allowing parallel submissions, but I did not go down that rabbit hole in time for this webinar. So I'm seeing requests to put the link in. I will do that right now.
We just stuck it in there. It's in there.
Oh, great. Thank you.
That's to the STeP program. Yep.
Hey, things happen without me doing them. That's fantastic. So please, if you think your technology or your device-led combo product might be applicable, give that a read. If it still seems kind of ethereal, because I do think some of their examples are kind of willy-nilly, we can always work through any team that wants to discuss it and see if it's a good pathway for them.
So if we're sitting there and we're thinking, okay, I know FDA is trying a lot of stuff. I mean, we also how much FDA worked to get emergency use authorizations out, and they're trying, and we've heard Jeff Shuren's heart in the whole thing, trying to adapt to make startups able to get to market still safe and efficacious. Breakthrough device pathway, if we've got something and it's life-saving, life-sustaining, it's going to really address a big problem, and there's nothing on the market, correct me if I'm wrong here, then we might be eligible for breakthrough. But if there is something on the market and we can prove that we're safer or more efficacious and it's device focused, now STeP is what's stepping in to give us another option.
Safer benefit risk profile, a positive benefit risk profile. So I don't even know if efficacious, I'm sure there's an example that would fit, but you just have to keep thinking, I made something safer. I made the benefit risk profile better. I'm preventing something bad from happening.
As compared to a device that's already out there.
Yep.
That's great. I want to see if our audience has any questions on this. This is really fascinating, Adrienne. We appreciate your diving into this and sharing it with us. It's all happening as it happens here. Let's see. Our friend Ken Spencer has a question.
Yeah, so Adrienne, thank you very much. You've always done a great job in clarifying the FDA guidance in air quotes there. So
thank you.
And I've gone back and looked at your presentation on breakthrough several times out there. So in this one, it seems to me like the FDA with the STeP program has, I'm going to say, modernized or changed or a lot of the things that were in the breakthrough program. Do you think there's a chance that they're going to align these two things?
That is a good question. I don't know if I have an answer. I mean, in the sense they did make some major changes, like where I pointed out where it's really certainly diverged from breakthrough. If I saw anything, if regulations and executive orders and things around billing codes and getting innovations to patients faster play a role, that might be the one bullet point I could certainly see being updated in breakthrough, that a company, even after they've submitted for breakthrough, could still, or after they submitted their pre-market review, could still possibly get it so that they can then continue that acceleration onto the market. I think what the FDA is realizing is they can do all they can on their end to review everything you're sending them, to do everything to get your device out there faster, as fast as you can move, And if it gets there and you can't get Medicare or Medicaid or an insurance to pay for it, it's still not getting to the patients. And that's really the focus of all these programs, is accelerating the innovative, safe, amazing technologies to the patients. And the FDA doesn't want to be the blockade to that. So how can they help with that?
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ken, for the question. We'll give another second. If there's any other questions, feel free to raise a hand or type it into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I don't know if we have this information, Adrienne, but I'm sure the question will arise. And again, I'm not sure the answer. I'm not sure if you've seen this. Do we know where FDA prioritizes EUAs at this point compared to standard submissions like a traditional 510K or a STeP program or a breakthrough? I think we're all sort of wrestling with how much does FDA care about EUAs at the moment?
That is a good question. I certainly haven't seen anything specific on it. I also haven't gone looking. We have heard, from the regulatory forum mill that there have been significant delays. Some people are even submitting pre-subs and being told to go home and check back in 4 months. So we know that the EUAs are taking that top priority. In the most recent breakthroughs that have been allowed, that I've been working on in the past, as soon as the breakthrough comes through, a lead reviewer reaches out, they say, hey, let's set up that next interaction. Let's make that next game plan. Let's move your stuff forward. And in these ones, there hasn't been that pull from them. So I'm going to guess that UAs are still taking the forefront of the focus. That is completely a guess, though.
Completely. Well, and I think we've already seen, like you said, it also depends on which division you're in and exactly what's of interest, and they may be prioritizing based on what they think needs to get out there. Again, all conjecture at this point. Well, this has been absolutely great. This is going to be one people are going to reference, and you can get to those at intubing.com/medtech-crossroads, and this one will be up in the near future if you want to reference people to the STeP program. Adrienne, is there anything else we should be thinking about? Or, I just did it. I just said STeP program. Oh, failure.
I think they missed out on some checking with their marketing department on that one. For the STeP, or the Safer Technologies program.
Very good. Leave the E out. Anything else we should be thinking about today, Adrienne? Any other things you want to bring to our attention as long as we got you here?
No, thanks for having me.
It's always great. And if you've got any questions, we can get those to Adrienne about this or anything else that she's talked about in the show. And we're really thankful to have you here today, Adrienne.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thanks for it. Have a good weekend. Great. It's always fun to see FDA trying. And like Adrienne said, these things are work in progress. But we've seen really good things out of that breakthrough device pathway. So we're hoping to see those out of the STeP as well. We leave the program off the end. Next up, I want to welcome my next guest, Stephen Rapundalo of MichBio. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy Friday afternoon.
Happy Friday afternoon. It's good to see you, sir. And we see you've got that's not a virtual backdrop back there, by the way. That is the real deal. We've got the MichBio happening, repurposing the trade show booth, but looking good, sir.
Yeah, my wife doesn't like the drapes in the house, but no, just kidding.
It's great. We've seen so many virtual backdrops over these last number of months that I think there's going to be a premium now on real backdrops for Zoom meetings, but it's looking good. I just want to remind everybody that MichBio was one of the organizations that when everyone was going around sharing information and we got a harebrained scheme to go out there and try to put people together into a sort of a live thing. And Stephen, MichBio was one of the organizations that just got right in there and said, yeah, we'll send out the word. We'll bring people together. And that very first day that we did COVID Connect, we had 230 live callers. And the interest has continued as we've transitioned to talk about the things that we all have of mutual interest. But every time you're on here, Stephen, I just want to say thank you for that, because you just once again proved that you connect people, and MichBio connects people and puts people together. So we're always grateful for that. And we wanted to take a minute you've got a couple really cool events coming up. One is happening real shortly here, and then one's happening in March. And we wanted to give you some time to talk about those and maybe hear a little bit about a couple other things.
Yeah, it's, obviously it's been an interesting year for everyone, and we're no different. We've had to pivot in many different ways, but still try to fulfill our mission. And that in part is, of course, like you said, connecting, facilitating, referring, providing resources and other and services and such to our members and beyond here in the state. And so you know, we've tried to do our best, and thankfully we're still still doing okay. But and certainly in the case of events, like everybody, like you, had to turn to these virtual events. And at least from our standpoint, you know, what the chore for us has been is to change up the in-person directly into a virtual. So it's more than just doing a Zoom meeting like this kind. It's, you know, having simultaneous breakout sessions, exhibit booths, that kind of thing. And we had our first one under those kinds of circumstances back about a month ago, on a topic that was brand new for us, which was it was a patient advocacy forum. So we brought together patients and patient groups from around Michigan and beyond to talk about their issues. You know, patient engagement in product development, in regulatory and things like that. It was phenomenal. We had 160 people, you know, and it was a myriad of disease areas and such. It was quite an event. So on the success and the heels of that success, you know, we're now here in 21. There is an event coming up on February 3rd. It's our BioTalent Summit. That was a casualty from early COVID. It was supposed to be held last March in person, and we naively rescheduled, and then finally gave up and said, nope, we're doing this virtually now. And here it is, almost upon us. Here's another event that we haven't really spent a lot of time on. The last and the only time that we've ever focused on the topic was about 8 years ago. The whole idea here is to bring together talent supply and talent demand. We've recognized over the years, listening to all sorts of companies, big and small, irrespective of sectors, whether it be MedTech or biotech or pharma, or whatever, that there are challenges here in Michigan about finding good or the right talent to fill workforce needs. And so this is going to bring industry types together with educational institutions and other stakeholders. We've got a great lineup, you know, folks from Stryker, from NSF International here in Ann Arbor. We've got a session on, we want to hear the perspective from job seekers. We want employers to hear how tough it is to actually go job hunt. We're going to be doing a session on best practices from other states, like Massachusetts, which obviously is a major biotech hub. We're going to spotlight some specialized or customized training programs that have been put in place here in Michigan that are opportunistic and taking advantage of employer, you know, needs. So it should be a great event. I would definitely, you know, say to any company here in Michigan, in our industry, you know, tell your HR, your talent, workforce development personnel to go to our events calendar. In fact, I think there's a banner on our right on our homepage, and it'll take you to the program. And I think it's fit. You know, it's turning out to be a pretty good program. So that's the front one that's coming up here in a week and a half or so. And then in March, we are delighted to finally pull together a focus on digital health. It's something that we've been talking about for a long time. You know, this whole, and I use the term digital health in probably the most liberal, loosest definition possible, because it's kind of wild and woolly. You know, it means different things to different people. For us, for me, it's you know, anything that deals with information and information technology as it relates to our, you know, the bioscience and the healthcare industry. So it's informatics, it's telehealth, it's wearables, you know, it's medical devices talking to whatever, wherever. It's about patients. It's about product development in MedTech and pharma. both during the development of the products, but also the adoption of and the use of those products by patients. So it's going to be a half-day virtual event, and I'm really excited. I finally got my friend Bakul Patel, who heads up the FDA's center, now the Center of Excellence for Digital Health. He's going to be the featured speaker and kind of do sort of an FDA town hall on everything digital health. Of course, it comes on the heels. I think just a week ago, they put out an action plan for artificial intelligence and machine learning for medical devices. So things like that, he's gonna certainly speak to. The other areas that we want to focus in on and have some discussion, of course, are cybersecurity, areas of data privacy, and it's above and beyond just HIPAA, because there are California has updated their privacy laws. Of course, the EU has theirs, and so whether it's entrepreneurs or established companies that are trying to develop products, there's a need to understand these topics and integrate them right from the get-go of product development. And then I think, as Adrienne was pointing out with the whole MCIT, which is something that we battled, in favor of. We'll see what happens now with the new administration, but then there's the whole question of payment, and how is that going to be dealt with some of these digital health products, especially those that are more patient facing. It's we're piecing together the program as we speak, and hopefully we'll have that out in a few weeks' time, and very much looking forward to that one. Yeah. And
that's
then
gonna be
third, but not least, as well, you participated in our medical device summit back in it seems ages ago, back in May of 2019. We had hoped to do something again last year, but of course COVID wreaked havoc on that. But we are now planning one, virtual one, of course, in April, probably latter part of April. We're trying to kind of figure out what the main focus, what the features will be for that one. But that's going to be coming up as well. So stay tuned.
That's very exciting. We love what you're doing there, and the people that you've been able to bring. I mean, it's been over the years, you've brought many folks from the agency to the state of Michigan. I remember a number of years ago, the commissioner, I believe it was, and then Jeff Shuren was here in 2019, and just a real great track record of bringing those folks here. So we've got the BioTalent Summit coming up in the next couple of weeks here. We've got the FDA Digital Health Forum happening at the end of March. Is that right? End of March.
BioTalent on February 3rd, the Michigan Forum on Digital Health on March 31st in the morning, and then a date to be determined for the Medical Device Summit, most likely late April.
For the next Medical Device Summit. This is great, Stephen. And we just posted, it's interesting you brought up the FDA's announcement about AI and machine learning. We just posted the link to that thing that you referenced. That's been a frequent question here. A lot of folks working on machine learning, so folks will be interested to take a look at that as well. That's wonderful. And I know you guys have expanded your programs for MichBio members and things like that. We just saw some announcements on that recently, so I do definitely, as community members, we love what MichBio does, and we're thankful for you and all your connections. I got to tell our audience, Stephen, one of the things that you have always impressed me, you had, I believe, a career in politics. You've always been closely associated.
Don't hold that against me.
Oh, no, we won't. It's really interesting. Some years ago, I know Stephen had reached out, and you guys do this from time to time. You'll do like legislative fly-ins and things like that during non-COVID times. And I joined you on one of those a number of years ago, and it was, I just said, I want to go see what this is all about. And we went to Capitol Hill, and I feel like the blinders came off because, you, MichBio, as well as AdvaMed, had arranged various meetings with folks, and you got quite a bit of access, and we were going and we were visiting with senators literally under the floor of the Capitol. We were meeting with delegations. And I feel like for me, the blinders came off that what I could hear on the news is not what I could hear by sitting down with these folks. And Stephen Rapundalo and MichBio and AdvaMed had given this access, and it was very interesting. At the time, the medical device excise tax was the thing that was really forefront, and it was interesting to hear all the nuances where somebody on the same side of the aisle as somebody else on the same side of the aisle, they'd have these wildly different nuances about how we should pay for, at the time it was Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. So I've always respected your connections and your ability to help us understand that side of the world. I think a lot of times we think of MichBio just as a, oh, you guys are a biosciences organization, but I want everyone to know Stephen's connections in that whole, and understanding in the whole political side of the world goes very deep. I wanted to ask you, Stephen, what do you make of two things, as much or as little as you want to say, as long as we got you here? We have an administration change now happening, and we're going to leave the politics aside per se for most issues, but in terms of how it comes down from MedTech, biotech, your thoughts on that. And then also, I think you were here when we shared some of this vaccine rollout stuff, and I was surmising that there's a lot of political posturing going on, but it's hard to sort through what's political posturing and what's things that we should really be thinking about or concerned about in terms of that rollout. So I'd love to, just as long as we got you here, get your thoughts on those two topics.
Yeah. Well, before I answer those two, let me thank you first for acknowledging, the work that we do and many groups like us in the other states on advocacy on public policy issues. You mentioned AdvaMed, but we're a state affiliate of 3 national organizations. There's AdvaMed, the Advanced Medical Technology, which historically, or at its roots, was the big medical device companies. Now they've grown to be, much more inclusive of all sorts of size companies. And then the other med device is the association is the Medical Device Manufacturers Association, which historically has been the small to mid-sized ones, and they still are. So we work with both those groups. And then thirdly, we're a state affiliate of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, so on the biotech/pharma side. And then fourth, we're also, we work closely with pharma, that trade group, but they don't have, state affiliations, if you will. So we're very immersed in Washington, but I would say, we're just as equally so here in Lansing. And you mentioned the fly-ins and that. Yeah, those obviously have been put on hold because of COVID, although just today, Bio announced that they will hold an in-person fly-in in November, so go figure.
Wow.
But we ourselves have, up until last year, we did a Capitol Day here in Lansing, and we took that model that you participated in and just sort of transposed it here. This year we're looking to, as we speak, to try to schedule something probably in early May. It'll be virtual, but it's an opportunity for companies and others in our community to tell your story to legislators and speak to issues that are important. One that I'll just throw out because it's just so glaring, and that is, we're one of the few states that doesn't have a statewide R&D tax credit. It went away about 10 years ago when they changed up the whole Michigan corporate business tax structure. Well, we would love to have that back, especially for small companies. Right? That would really help our industry a lot. So it's things like that, that we're battling on, or like you said, the medical device tax or MCIT. I mean, it's there are SEC rules, intellectual property and patent reform. I mean, it's a myriad of issues that we get involved in. But certainly even here in Lansing. So we will have a virtual fly-in in Lansing come May. So aside from that, your two questions. I don't know how much political posturing there is, as much as to me, it's been more of a failure of leadership, of having, a single point of reference, one one voice that is providing the necessary information to citizens, to patients, to to the private sector, to manufacturers, about the state of affairs, what it is that we need, what do we need to produce, how much, where it needs to go, and all of that, and do so on a basis, based on evidence, on real evidence, right? So science has to rule. And so certainly it's been, it was inordinately frustrating the last 4 years because it was complete dysfunction. For every approach that they were taking here, somebody else was taking an approach over here, and the left and the right hands didn't know what was going on. I saw some of that earlier last year here in the state as they were trying to gear up their COVID response and talking to different, when we were trying to identify PPP manufacturers and sources, right? And I'd be talking to one person in the state government, and they wouldn't know about another person in the state government that could, so it was eye-opening. It was frustrating. Now here we are with the vaccine distribution. I can tell you, because I have regular calls with certain manufacturers, that it's certainly not an issue of manufacturing and production. They have the supplies, but they're getting their guidance, from the feds as to where it needs to go, when it needs to go. And then, I also know from firsthand experience and information about how it's being deployed on the ground. There are providers who have been very organized in their vaccination of employees and whatnot, to the point where, surprisingly, what I've been baffled at is how many healthcare frontline workers have declined to be inoculated, which then, of course, opened up these extra vaccine to be available. And despite, organized plans, they were offering vaccines to inpatients, to whomever wanted it, irrespective of condition or age or, what have you. And even beyond that. So, you could place family members on a list. So, multiply that 50 times over, plus you've got, you showed that map about the vaccination rates. I took notice of the fact that all the states that were doing really, really well, of course, had very small populations.
That's right. Yep.
But nonetheless, those are typically the ones that have a harder time deploying resources just because they're more rural, because, of all sorts of things. So, it's been a hodgepodge. And I'm sure there's there's a certain measure of politics involved. But to me, I've always viewed it as more of a measure of dysfunction and lack of proper leadership and management, clear guidances. Today there's a guidance, tomorrow it's changed, and the next day it's something different. I mean, you wouldn't run your business that way, right? I mean, you wouldn't be around for very long if you did. So it's been tough to see all of that, and then try to advocate, try to influence, and steer them the right way. We submitted recommendations to the governor and DHHS and that weeks ago, actually before Christmas, to make sure that our production and certain workers were in the first phase, the lower part of the first phase, to get vaccinated. For example, the Pfizer production employees, right? I mean, you would think it would be pretty common sense that you don't want to have the very folks that are creating the vaccine to get sick, because then there won't be anybody making vaccine, right? So they should really get vaccinated. But yet we had to tell that to to the governors. And that was something that we worked with AdvaMed and MDMA closely on. So,
Yeah, that's, I think what you're saying about the splits between the different groups. I think we've seen that over and over again, that, the feds say, well, we ordered the vaccines, and then Pfizer's or others are saying, well, we shipped them, and then, the state's getting them and trying to roll them out. And then the municipalities are kind of saying, oh, we're not getting enough. And everyone's just sort of doing a little bit of this. But I think the point that you're making, which I think is well stated, is that that's showing that everyone's just acting in their own silos, and we're not getting that overarching.
Well, and they're operating such because they've, out of necessity. I mean, because the feds basically abrogated their leadership role and threw it to the states, and the poor states were not equipped really to go out and deal with procurement on a global scale, and things like that. And then, of course, everybody's fighting over everybody else. And I literally knew about specific PPE shipments that were en route and then were basically hijacked by the feds and say, no, and we're putting them over here, even though a private entity had already paid for them.
I remember hearing this back in the spring, that private shipments were being.
Oh yeah, it was all real. It was all real. It was, everything you've heard and then some was happened. But I think the poor states, Michigan included, really had a tough time having to step up into the breach, because there wasn't a central entity that took command as they really should have. Now you're seeing that supposedly change. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Stephen, I appreciate your perspective and appreciate all that MichBio is doing. We're going to look forward to these events that are coming up, and we're hoping that you'll come back on and update us in some regular increments in the future, because we really appreciate what you guys are doing, and grateful for your presence in the state.
Happy to.
That's awesome. I want to thank Stephen, and I'm going to give just another 30 seconds here before we close here at the top of the hour for anyone who's got a question on something we've touched on the show, maybe for one of our panelists today, maybe something we've touched on before. Maybe there's an announcement of that needs to go out to the community, and we'd like to know about that. So we're going to give about 30 seconds for that before we close the show down here at the 3 o'clock hour on the 22nd of January, 2021. And not seeing any hands raised, I want to thank you for being here on MedTech Crossroads. We appreciate your participation in making this all that it is. We're looking forward next week to have our friends at Packaging Compliance Labs. We haven't had a manufacturer or a manufacturing support on for a little while, and we're going to go over to the west side of the state, and we are going to hear about how packaging is tested and developed, because to maintain sterility, that's a really important part of a medical device. So I hope you join us next week on MedTech Crossroads. Thanks for being here.